Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christine Keisinger, and this is week 3. Very hard to believe. It's week 3 of our Fundamentals of Steadiness journey. I want to welcome all of you, whether you're joining us live or you'll be watching this at another time. I'm just really glad that you're here. If you're here, or if you're listening at another time, I just want to remind you that in addition to today's session, you have access to a very, very robust array of curriculum that we started, 6 weeks ago. The entire resiliency course is there for you, all kinds of great content paired with all sorts of interesting and really, really helpful practices. And then, of course, all of the content from weeks 1 and 2 of the steadiness portion of this lengthy daily 8-week journey. So just as means of a review, since I've not seen you since last Wednesday, again, I want to bring you back to the image of the Karen, which we often find in nature. They are symbols of incredible steadiness, incredible balance. And we've been working with the Karen over the course of the last 2 weeks as a model for what it means to have whole health. A model of whole health that has at its foundation our own intuition. And so we were moving through the elements of the Karen during our last session together. So just in terms of a review, and if you've not seen the previous sessions, I really invite you to go back to the session where I talked about what is whole health. And whole health goes far beyond, well beyond our physical well-being to include all different aspects of who we are. And you'll see in a moment that the whole health Karen helps us to see that all of these various areas of our life are profoundly interconnected. So if I have dis-ease, unrest, turbulence, illness in any one of the various aspects of my life, those things will begin to impact all other areas. The other question that's sort of been framing the steadiness portion of this journey is, how can we find steadiness as we care for the whole self? I always want you to remember the image of the Karen moving forward, long after we depart. Remembering that it is a symbolic representation of what it means to be steady and strong. Those Karens in nature, we often find them near water, can withstand the elements in a way that's truly unbelievable because of the way that they're built. They're built intentionally. They're built with meticulousness. They're built with a lot of focus and attention. And we can bring the same kind of focus and attention to the building of our own lives, particularly as this relates to our well-being. The statement that accompanies our journey through the Karen is this: I am at my best when. For example, one of the important pieces of the Karen is physical health. I am at my best physically when. And I've been inviting you to just jot down 3 to 5 things that you can think of that make you feel strong and at your best physically. And then my other invitation is, can you bring those things into your daily life? Maybe just for a week, maybe focusing on one of the 3 things for a week and then adding the second, so that during this global pandemic, the one thing that we can be assured of is that we're taking care of ourselves. So I really, really invite you to use the Karen as a tool. If you hear barking in the back, it's Stella, my Great Pyrenees. She'll stop soon. There might be someone at the door. So this is the Karen. Please remember, if you've not been with us over the course of the last 2 weeks, that this was created by Dr. Lissa Rankin in 2012. Dr. Rankin was very interested in really changing the paradigm related to how we think about our health. Very, very quickly, I'll remind you again that she was very intrigued by the fact that she would have patients come in and talk about all kinds of physical symptoms, and she could not help herself but to wonder, what do these physical symptoms mean when we place them in the context of our own life narratives? It's sort of like Caroline Myss always says, our biology is our biography. Our biography is our biology. There is an interdependent link between who we are as physical beings and every aspect of our life, and vice versa. So the cool thing about the Whole Health Karen, and I'm just reminding you if you've been here last week, is that foundational stone. In a lot of models of health, the foundational stone is physical health. In Lissa Rankin's model, the foundational stone is your own intuition. And she makes a very, very strong suggestion that when we can rest and find our strength and our foundation in our own intuition, all of these other areas of our life will start to improve, including our physical health. Last Wednesday, we went through a lot of these stones. We talked about physical health first. Just a couple of reminders. I want to ask you to think about what I identified as sort of the 6 pillars of physical health that you can use as your own template. And if you remember, they were hydration, nourishment, what am I feeding myself, movement, sleep, breath, am I breathing? And am I breathing in ways that really serve me? And detoxification, how am I expelling from the body, from the mind, that which I no longer need? So hydration, I use the word nourishment as opposed to nutrition. That's a game changer. How am I nourishing myself? And that really refers to, what am I taking into the system? Does it serve me or not serve me? Movement, sleep, breath, and detoxification or elimination. But really finishing that statement, I am at my best physically when, how would you answer that? Or how would you complete that sentence? What 3 to 5 things put you at your best? You know what they are. Are you doing them? And if not, can you do them? Can you implement them, weave them into your daily routine? We looked at mental and emotional health. Remember that I wanted to include in this stone the word emotion. This has to do with the degree to which you feel, for the most part, a sense of equanimity in the mind, a sense of evenness, even in the face of life's storms, life's pandemic. I know that for me, when I complete that phrase, I am at my best emotionally. I am at my best emotionally when I am responsive versus reactive. I am at my best emotionally when I can allow what is. I might not like it, but can I allow it to be there? I am at my best emotionally when I'm checking in with the stories that I'm running in my mind. I want to just back up a little bit and bring back to your awareness a quote that I shared with you last time. It's a quote by Pema Chodron, where she talks about the power that resides when we can allow feelings that we might deem or classify on the really difficult side, or really challenging, or even negative. And I want to share this passage, and I want to share it again. I shared it last time because it's one that I want to take with you, because so many of us are dealing with and feeling really difficult feelings right now. She writes, feelings like disappointment, embarrassment, irritation, feelings like resentment, anger, feelings like jealousy, envy, fear, instead of being bad news, instead of deeming them bad, these feelings are actually very clear moments that teach us when we're holding back. This stopped me in my tracks when I read it. When I feel disappointment, anger, fear, frustration, irritability, when I feel jealousy and envy, I feel physically held back. So just think about that. The next time you're feeling some of these things, whatever you might classify as more a difficult, challenging, painful feeling, ask yourself, is that holding me back? She writes, these kinds of feelings perk us up, and they really invite us to lean into them rather than to collapse or to back away. They're like messengers. They're like messengers that show us with terrifying clarity exactly where we are stuck. So these feelings can have us feeling both stuck and really held back. When these feelings arise, she writes, this is like the moment that becomes the perfect teacher. And lucky for us, that teacher is with us wherever we go. I believe that quote came from one of her earliest books, a book that I have read and reread over and over again, When Things Fall Apart. In fact, I just pulled it from my shelf yesterday because I'm going to take a look at it again. And it's so valuable. And encountering this quotation just last week, I know I've read it, but I just read it with brand new eyes and had a very different kind of understanding of it. So I want you to think about, when you're thinking about that mental, emotional health stone, to think about, how are you meeting up with feelings right now that kind of feel like they're a challenge for you, or they have that tone of unpleasantness or difficulty? Can you see the ways in which they're keeping you stuck or holding you back? Can you allow them without resistance, without shame, without guilt, that they're there in the first place? So can you just allow them to be there? And as she indicates in that quotation, can you imagine allowing them to be your teacher? What are they trying to tell you? What are they trying to show you? So, how would you complete the phrase, I am at my best emotionally when? Jot down 3 to 5 things and check in with yourself, asking what kinds of adjustments, what kinds of changes in my own life might I make so that I have a better sense of health and ease in that emotional part of who I am, and even in the mind. Talked about money, really, really important stone. And I talked about why that is during our last session. When I think about money and I think about how I operate from an optimal perspective when it comes to something as significant as the role that money plays in my own life. What's really important to my own well-being is being very clear that however it is that I'm dealing with money, thinking about money, however I'm thinking about it or dealing with it, is a mindset that I've chosen. I spent a lot of time in our last session talking about how our mindsets about money are socialized into us at a very young age. And I mentioned Jerry Kalana's book, Reboot, Leadership and the Art of Growing Up. His book is really interesting because you wouldn't imagine that this is true. But the opening chapter 1 of his book, that's going to take you on a journey of rebooting and growing up in your own leadership style, asks us to think about our relationship to money and the way we were socialized into understanding money and dealing with money, in many cases has had so many of us make certain decisions about the work we do in the world, how we feel about success or how we define success and failure, certain habits and patterns that we may have internalized unconsciously that are wreaking havoc in our lives. In other words, when we can come to a place where we've really contemplated, how am I dealing with money? And making the decision that I'm in charge of that. I'm going to choose that. If necessary, I'm going to unwrangle or disentangle myself from all of these patterns. I'm going to shed these patterns that have been so firmly entrenched within me so that I can feel freedom related to money and financial well-being. And that's another really important thing to think about, is what does it mean for me to feel financially well? Really, really important stone. Environment, if you remember, refers to how we feel about the spaces that we occupy. How does the space of our own home feel? And is it supportive of us functioning at our highest level? And there may be things going on in our home space, in our workspace, that are temporary, but kind of make us really uncomfortable. So many of us have found ourselves now setting up workspace in our own homes, and we might really still be transitioning with all of that. So the environment stone can feel really rocky, but here's what we know about environment. It really matters. Where you live, the space that holds and supports you, is very critical to your well-being. And that means your home space, your workspace, any places that you find yourself in very frequently. And I also talked about the fact that environment also refers to the environment of your closest relationships. Is this a relationship that is safe for me to be in? Is this a relationship that feels like it holds me and protects me when I need support? Sometimes our relational spaces are not the best places for us. Environment's a big one. It's a big one even in the image. Just look at that. It's a big stone. It really matters. Creativity. The only thing I want to emphasize here is how critically important it is for you, regardless of your age, regardless of your stage of life, regardless of your own perception of yourself as creative or not creative. Every human being is born with an innate capacity and drive toward creativity. And creativity, this is one of the things, what I'm about to say is one of the ways in which I sort of like to imagine I'm giving you the pink permission slip to practice and to re-engage in and to play with that part of you that's creative. And that is, it's very serious impact. I make better decisions if I am regularly engaged in some sort of creative activity. I am better at discerning if I, on a regular basis, am engaging in activities that allow me the space to be creative. Really important for those of you who might be listening and are in leadership roles, or perhaps are business owners. You are likely having a lot of conversations and a lot of thoughts about the fact that you are having to reimagine your business. I said last time, creativity, fear, overwhelm, negativity cannot occupy mental space at the same time. And I invite you to try that out. Try to be creative, engaged creatively, and at the same time be filled with worry, doubt, fear, negativity. So just as a stress reduction tool, making a decision to do something creative every day, and it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, is a form of giving the mind a break. It's releasing the mind from, it's like setting the mind free, even if it's temporarily, from fear, worry, negativity. I'm just thinking about what are some of the things that I do on a daily basis. One of the things I do every day is I have this huge basket of all kinds of essential oils. And I love to create blends for my home diffusers. So that takes 5 minutes. And it's when I'm doing that, I'm present, I'm in the flow, I'm excited. It's a multi-sensory experience. I'm working with the oils, which are my truest and trusted companions. And for that 5-minute period of time, I am not in a mental space of overwhelm, anxiety, negativity, and fear. So a few times per day, and if that's all that I do for the entire day, I have at least for 5 minutes engaged my creativity. And you can elaborate on that however you'd like, but it's a really important stone. Spirituality is very broadly defined. This is really about your connection to, for some of us, it's our higher power as we understand that. For some of us, it's our connection to nature. It's our connection to awe, wonder, mystery. It's our connection to truth. For some of us, spirituality is defined as love. What plugs you into that? I am at my best spiritually when? How would you complete that phrase, that statement? And are you allowing yourself those opportunities to connect to that stone? If you remember in the sexuality stone, we included the word intimacy. And this is important because although sexuality is an important piece of all of this, I am at my best sexually, I am at my best intimately also belongs in this stone, because it makes the stone more inclusive of a host of different kinds of relationships within which we are really intimate. And if you remember, I used that phrase, the breakdown of that word intimacy, into me, see. Intimacy, the act of engaging in a deep degree of closeness with another person, that you feel that you can really see each other and you can see what is authentically there. We talked quite a bit about that last time. If you missed that session, go back to it. It was last Wednesday, and I really flesh out what that intimacy piece means. But it's vital. It is vital. And when we think about the word vital, we want to think about life-giving, life-sustaining. The intimacy stone is vital to our health and well-being. Work, life, purpose. Work is never enough. We know that, especially as we move into our 40s and beyond, that for many of us, the notion of purpose becomes ever more critical. I want to know that I'm here for a reason, that whatever it is that I do in my very short period of time here, that it made a difference, that I'm going to leave something behind that's of value to others. Legacy. I am at my best in terms of my own work and my sense of purpose when I'm plugged into it, when I remember it. That even though my own work might logistically feel very overwhelming, when I want to drop out of that sense of overwhelm, I only have to remind myself of what my purpose is. Working on purpose and meaning is something that you just don't do in a weekend workshop or, writing in a journal. It's something that's always evolving, and it's something that I'm always honing and polishing and sometimes radically changing, but it's always with me as something that's really important. I may have mentioned in the resiliency series that several years ago, this beautiful soul, Bonnie Ware, wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. She's a palliative care nurse in the United Kingdom. And she spends a lot of time with people who are in their final days, their final hours. And for those who were lucid, she started having conversations with them about their regrets. And this sort of falls into the category of end-of-life communication, deathbed conversations. It's not at all unusual that someone would talk about what they regret. And she thought, you know what, I'm just going to collect the data here. And she began to study what themes emerge. And she discovered that, you know what, there are 5 top things that people tend to regret at death. And the first always gives me chills. The first regret goes something like, I regret that I didn't live the life I wanted to live. I lived the life that was expected of me, or the life chosen for me. Just take that in. I lived the life expected of me. It wasn't one that I chose. That's a tough regret. And the other regret, and I'm not sure if it's regret number 2 or regret number 3, is that I didn't spend enough time cultivating and nurturing relationships that were really important to me. So, purpose, relationships are absolutely critical to our well-being. What does this life mean? What is it gonna mean when I come to the end and I'm reflecting? What does it mean? What does purpose mean if my reflecting upon my life comes much sooner than I ever expected? Which naturally sort of takes us over to the relationship piece. Most people will say that in the end, when we strip it all away, what really, really mattered were the quality of the relationships that we were able to have over the course of our lives. And that those relationships are what we cherish most. what I'd like for you to think about when you're contemplating the stability and the steadiness and the strength of this stone is, I am at my best relationally when. How would you complete that phrase? But to also break it down into categories of relationships. For example, I am at my best as an intimate partner when. Jot down 3 to 5 things. I am at my best as a colleague or coworker when. How would you answer that? I am at my best as a parent when. I am at my best as a daughter when. I am at my best as a sibling when. Just think about various relationships that really matter to you, because the answers are going to be different. There might be some commonalities. For example, I can say across the board in all of the various relationships I just mentioned, I am at my best relationally when I'm present. Hands down. That's at the top of my list, right? But then there are other qualities that, if they are present, help me to operate at a really high level in the context of these various relationships. So there you have it. Here's all these stones: physical health, emotional, mental health, money, finances, environment, creativity, sexuality, intimacy, our spirituality, whatever that means for you, work-life purpose, relationships, all resting on the firm foundation of intuition. All intricately, intimately, interdependently linked. Just think, if I'm having relational issues all the way down here, it's going to affect my physical health. Issues in my physical health are going to affect my creativity. Money. Lack of wellness in the realm of financial stability and money might impact work-life purpose. So this is a really powerful model. 2 sessions ago, I spoke in very detailed ways about intuition, where intuition lives in the brain, the connection between intuition and gut. Intuition is real. It's our deepest knowing. And so if I can begin to make decisions about all of these areas of my health and well-being based on my intuition, it's really the first and one of the most important steps toward cultivating whole health. Remember that you can find access to the Whole Health Karen simply by Googling Whole Health Karen or Lissa Rankin, Dr. Lissa Rankin. If you click on images, you'll get this image will come up. You can print it out, and I strongly recommend taking it and working through it. And you can go back through the session last Wednesday and Monday and take the journey through the whole Karen again and sort of fill out, maybe even in the space of those stones, when are you at your best in all of these areas? I want to bring us into a very brief practice, just about 3 minutes or so, that's going to bring to a close this emphasis on the Karen, and then I'm going to introduce a new idea before we depart for the day. And this is really an inquiry or a contemplative meditation that gets you in touch with what it means to feel steady. So I want to invite you to come into a seated position, or if you'd like, if you feel more comfortable, you can certainly lie down. And if it's comfortable for you, I invite you to close your eyes. And if you're choosing to keep the eyes open, just allow your gaze to go soft. There's a little bit of noise in my background now because it's sleeting out. So if you hear that, that's what it is. Just let it be. And because this is an inquiry or a contemplation, I want to bring your awareness to your breath, just as it is. And if your mind starts to wander from the contemplation, just bring the awareness back to the breath. Settling down, settling in. What are you most grateful for? What arises when you hear the question? Just let it come up. What are you most grateful for? What are the most supportive things you can do for yourself starting today? What arises when you hear that question? How are you staying connected to your spirituality, however you define that? How are you staying connected? We are in the midst of a great global transition. Which grants us the opportunity to change. How will you choose to change at the deepest levels? Just allow whatever arises to arise. gratitude, support, connection, and choice. They all contribute to steadiness. Gently guide your awareness back to the breath. And whenever it feels right, gently open your eyes. So in that guided meditation, which we used as a contemplation, we focused on 4 things. What do you feel most grateful for? Just whatever came up. What are some supportive things you can do to care for yourself starting today? And if you want to, you can include others in that inquiry. How are you plugging in? How are you staying connected to whatever it is that really sustains you? And the final question, in the midst of so much change and transition, we are really being invited to make very intentional changes in our own life. What will you choose to change at the deepest levels? So gratitude, support, staying connected to that or whom sustains you, and choice. What choices are you going to make or are you making that support change? These are really important questions, and they're very steadying questions. There's nothing here that's threatening. They're very quiet, profound, and steadying questions. So I really invite you to use them, to work with them. They come out of some very recent work by Caroline Mace that directly speaks to the kind of anxiety and overwhelm that so many of us are feeling during this pandemic. So I want to set the foundation for our session next time, and that is the notion of triggers. We really can't expect to really get to a place where we can feel, I might not like what's happening, and what's happening might feel very turbulent, but I can breathe a sigh of relief because I know that I have some resources and skills and tools to help me to get steady. We really, really can't feel trust in being able to say that and feel that way unless and until we know what triggers us. When I use the word trigger and teach about triggers, I want you to bring to mind those issues, people, circumstances, and challenges that just take you from 0 to 100 without even thinking. In other words, when I'm triggered, and I really go with it and go right into reactivity, it means that something has happened, or I'm perceiving something, or something was said, there was a trigger, and rather than pausing and making a decision about how I'm going to respond, I go into high reactivity mode. Triggering can feel, I love this image, triggering can feel, when you're highly triggered, it can feel like your hair's on fire, that the house of your life is on fire. There are lots of different ways it can feel, but there is a very biological, chemical, physical sensation that accompanies not only being triggered, but those moments that precede being triggered. Our mindfulness practices, if done very consistently, can really get us to a point where we are able to feel the warning signs, like you are really close to being triggered. It's a really, really wonderful skill set to have. So before we leave today, this is where I want to what I want you to kind of start thinking about is there are a lot of different areas in our life where we can be triggered, and we're triggered in different ways in these different areas. For example, there are certain things that trigger me physically. There are certain foods that trigger me physically. In other words, for example, I'm very allergic to dairy. So any kind of dairy will trigger a host of physical reactions in me that cause a lot of stress. They put a lot of stress on my body and show up as pain and distress in my life. I have a very similar reaction to gluten. There are just a number of things that if I ingest physically, start this triggering. And there's really nothing I can do once it's ingested. That's an example. So we can get triggered physically, lots of different ways. We can be triggered emotionally. That there are certain things that, for as long as I've done this work, that can occur emotionally that push my buttons in a way that bring me right into reactivity. And so I really have to be mindful of those things. There are certain ways in which we're triggered relationally. This is a big one. I could spend a week teaching about this. There are certain things that can happen in a family that trigger me, or with certain family members. There are certain things that happen in close, intimate relationships between significant others that are very triggering. I mean, if you're in a close, intimate relationship, you can probably make a list of at least 5 things or 5 ways in which you get triggered by your partner. There are ways that we get highly triggered as parents. Lots and lots of ways. One of the biggest challenges of parenting is all the various kinds of triggering that it creates, and that those triggers change as your children grow and evolve and develop. And the word children there, if you are parenting, you'll also notice if you have multiple children, your children will trigger you in certain unique ways. And then there are professional triggers as well. There are things that come up between colleagues. There are things that come up in groups and teams. There are things that come up related to our work that can feel really triggering. For example, deadlines trigger me when I have writer's block, or when there's some sort of block to my creativity and I know that a deadline is looming. I can get really triggered. So I'd like for you to spend some time between now and Wednesday to think about how you get triggered, some of the ways you get triggered physically, emotionally, relationally, in terms of family, significant other, parenting, children, and then ways that you might get triggered in terms of your own professional work. When we come back on Wednesday, I'm going to introduce to you a really important model known as SCARF. It's actually an acronym that we're going to break down and dive deep into what each of the letters mean and why they're significant. The SCARF model is very significant for your well-being. It's very significant for your capacity to cultivate steadiness, because it gives you a lot of insight into why you get triggered in the first place. When I know what my triggers are and why I get triggered, it's one thing to know these are my triggers, but we don't always necessarily know why. Why does that person trigger me? Why does this situation trigger me? So when I can know those things, or there's real reasons for the triggering, the knowledge alone, when I start to get triggered, can dissipate the charge of the trigger, can in some cases completely interrupt the triggering process and the stress response that accompanies it. So I love that about this model. And I'll talk a little bit about how I came upon it and how I used it over the course of a month and the impact that it had. And then the other interesting thing about the model is that it gives you tremendous insight into other people. Typically, when people who are around us are triggered, we get triggered. If someone around us is reactive, we will often become reactive. And so I have learned that in knowing this model and working with this model, and in many ways living out this model, when someone in my life is very triggered, I am in a very good position now to choose responsivity over reactivity. And that ability to make a choice as to how I'm going to calmly respond to your triggering has granted me tremendous freedom, tremendous emotional freedom. And I want to share that freedom with you. When we can feel free because we have insight and we have understanding, and we can respond from a place of understanding and compassion, then we put ourselves in position to really experience that freedom. And I'm really no longer afraid of being around someone who's having a temper tantrum or a meltdown, or someone who's really angry and enraged. I might not like it, but I'm not afraid of it, because I know that I now have a model that helps me to understand why it's happening in the first place. So we're going to end a little bit early today. I want to thank you for being here. I hope you'll come back on Wednesday. Of all of the things that I teach, this probably falls into the top 10 of being most important. And I really look forward to sharing it with you. So I'll see you back here on Wednesday, but please join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. For a really special session with one of our master teachers, Jennifer O'Sullivan. Have a great day. Take care.